Hello and welcome to another session of otherTwoCents. In this episode, we're discussing how we secure our lives and our future in the face of natural disasters, global pandemics, and no social safety net. Now, what do I mean by this? COVID-19. This has been a paradigm shift. Suddenly, we cannot travel to our places of work. Our livelihoods are under threat. In fact, they've always been under threat. But there is every likelihood, even more serious global pandemics in the future. Viruses are nothing new. They come and go, and if you look through history, there's been loads of pandemics. Natural disasters, rainfall, climate change, it's impacting every country. It's indiscriminate. Unchecked, we will end up with flooded coastal cities, rain falling in the wrong places, basically countries unable to produce enough food for their populations. This is a scary prospect. Now, when we look at no social safety nets, pension pots are being raided, both by companies and by countries. This is an even more scary prospect than anything else, because it means when we get to our pension age, there will be nothing left for us to draw down on. I'm quite keen to hear what everybody else has to say about this, and I'll come to you, Mr. Quartey.
Thank you very much. Let me say that I always like to speak on practical issues and experience, not based on theories and doctrines. And like you rightly said, what do? We need to realize that prevention is better than cure. And in everything, we need to analyze and take precautionary measures as an individual, not to depend on so-called government institutions, whatever it is. I'm happy. I would like to, most of the time, use my experience because I've worked in the bank for 37 years. I've retired. I'm going to be 10 years. But right now in this pandemic situation, or what is happening, you must realize that even when you are growing up, there's the need for you to, as it were, take certain measures that will ensure your safety. Somebody may call it endowment fund, insurance, whatever it is. But you, as an independent person, must be sure that, you see, we have three categories of investments: the short-term investment, the medium-term investment, and the long-term investments. We need to see that, so that in case of all these situations, you are assured of a sound security, very sound security. And most of the time, people depend on institutions to take them to do things for them. But as an individual, what is your stake? How do you look at the future, as it were, on an individual basis?
Okay.
We're talking about the rain and all these things. I'm at Committee 10. There's a closed gutter just beside me. For the past 30 years, sometimes the water comes at a certain level. So what I have done is to plant green grass. And then my wall is just this, it's not a wall, but the hedges. So when the water flows in, it cannot take any of my properties away. They'll just be there. And these are the things you need to look at. And like, I'm also talking about the security. You need to save short time. And I've saved, I want to use a lot of experience. I've saved. I've also invested in land property, and I'm enjoying pension. So I do not have any anxiety in life. I've taken care of my 4 children to the university level. So now they have to take care of themselves. So concerning anxiety, I don't have a problem. And then there's this pandemic. Stay at home. Stay at home. I just have to stay at home.
Yeah.
And ensure, because I'm going to be 70 years. Why do I go out? To do what? Because we are more prone, exposed to what is happening.
That's right. So, Mr. Ebenezer, let me just try and understand this. So, it's interesting because we are some 30 years behind where you are now. And it's interesting to hear your perspectives on this. You've mentioned investments. You've mentioned having a pension. You've mentioned the fact that you've got substantial savings, which is keeping you in your retirement age.
Yes.
The problem we have in our time is society, inflation, all the difficulties and challenges of holding or securing a highly paid job is such that saving is a challenge. Pensions I touched on, it's being raided. I mean, pensions are linked to the stock market. We've had disaster after disaster. That is a challenge. You've mentioned investments. Investments is almost now a rich man's game. If you're barely keeping your head above water, it is, again, a challenge. So what advice, besides what you've told us, are you suggesting, or what angle should people in our age and indeed younger take to try and see off the risks that we face in our future? If you could briefly touch on that.
You see, like you are saying, the youth are thinking of getting what we took over 20 to 30 years to achieve.
Right.
Instead of starting, they said there's a saying that little drops of water makes a mighty ocean.
Indeed.
Little drops of water makes a mighty ocean. And then you have to cut your coat according to your size. You don't need to cut your coat. Yes, in every situation there are challenges, but there's a concept or a pattern that when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. So you have to rationalize and see where you are able to save at least something for the future.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yes.
No, finish your point, Mr. Quartey, and then I'll go to the other participants.
Yes, unfortunately, today you see a lot of young people driving 4 wheels and blah 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 because they are comparing themselves to those of us who have worked for so many years. Unfortunately,
indeed.
Unfortunately, they see me riding a Fortuna. They want to buy a Fortuna. They see me riding an Aventus. They want to buy Aventus. But they do not know that it took me so many years to get into that.
Yes. I mean, materialism is clearly a problem. It
has been the bane of our problem.
It has been. Let me jump to some of the other participants. Ernestina, I'll be interested to hear your views on this, if you don't mind sharing that with us.
Thank you, Mr. Quartey. You've touched on practical stuff as an investment for our future. However, my view is the source of life is Christ from a Christian perspective, because we don't know our tomorrow. So in the midst of pandemic, in the midst of natural disasters, of course, it's going to change our life. Of course, this could create, severe illnesses, etc., which is worrying. And then when we focus on that, that actually creates fear in our lives. So you lose hope and faith. Whereas from a Christian point of view, if you understand that, these pandemics and natural disasters have been actually pre-warned by Christ already in the Bible. If you're to read about it, we were promised, God mentions that there's going to be earthquakes, pandemic. So from that point of view, I'm not fearful. And, I'm not looking at my material stuff because, again, indeed, Mr. Quartey mentioned about pensions, investment. Those are wise things to do. But you could lose that equally. We've heard of the credit crunch. But if you have Christ, you could regain that. He's the source of life. And that could actually help you sustain. That's how I will sustain life. Because my hope is not in the material things I've got. My hope is in who the creator is, who God is, and what he can provide when I trust him. And once I've got the assurance, the faith, every day I'm grateful. Every day I know what he's going to do. And then I do understand that this too will pass. This is not the first pandemic. COVID-19 is not the first. People went through the SARS. We had the 9/11. We had the hurricane. There are more to come in the future as well. It may not be in our lifetime, but then it will pass. Whether you lose your employment is sad. But I find that when you don't have that perspective of who the source of life is, then you get worried. Then you're fearful. Then that's when you depend on your own self. But then with trusting that God is your provider, trusting that God is going to take us through, he gives us wisdom to create the wealth that Mr. Quartey is talking about. Even if I was to lose it, I'll make it again. That is my perspective. And so it's not so much about, okay, yes, unfortunately it's happened, but in the midst of that, I know who my source is. That is what this pandemic has taught us. People who are actually dependent on their material wealth, once they've lost their employment, once they've lost their investment, they're hopeless. But when you have faith in the greater being, which is God, from my perspective, you could create all that again. He will never leave you nor forsake you, as he promises us. So hence, the Christians as well, what we tend to do is you actually have to realize we are interdependent. So to sustain our life in society, what do? We take care of others. You love other people, people who are in a vulnerable position, you actually look out for them and help. So once we all help each other, we'll make it through the storm.
Okay, so that's an.
So can I come in?
Just give me 1 minute. I just want to press Ernestina on a point.
Yes.
So it's an interesting perspective, but here's my challenge, and it is not to rebut anything you've said because it's a perfectly valid point.
Yes.
You are saying as a highly qualified lawyer and solicitor, you've gone through years of training, years of experience. The very position you are in and having the ability or the blessing to be able to help others is based on a lot of hard work and a career choice that is enabling you to do this. So I guess the angle I want to come at this is what practical advice, because and I always cite this example, even as a Christian, you still have to hit the books or you're not going to pass your exams. And where would you end up then? So what real practical advice do you have to say to people in the face of the topic of discussion, which is no safety net, pandemics, challenges that we face generally? What practical advice would you give? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Right. So the practical advice would be in the midst of the chaos, we are being bombarded daily with negative news. The numbers are rising. The numbers of, how many death tolls, whether it's accurate or not, we don't know. So my practical advice would be limit the intake of such bad news. Maybe perhaps have one source of news, a provider, where you just, kind of breeze through what's going on in a day to be aware. But don't entertain the news 24 hours to become a COVID-19 expert. What are you going to, write about it? What good would it do for your life? So the more negative news, what you actually allowing you becomes you, isn't it? What is promoting is fear. It's crippling you. You are not going to move forward. So really, you intake, and in the midst of chaos, you could exalt yourself. For example, we are not able to go to the office day to day, but what? We could still do video conferencing online. Take practical steps in terms of creative. Just think of that way. And again, I will still come back to the wisdom of God to give me ideas to do that. Yes, my hard work, but if I didn't have the breath of God, if I didn't actually, in terms of know who God is or wake up in the morning, how would I be able to achieve? Okay. So yes, God gave me the wisdom to inquire, to seek, to be able to get knowledge, to do things I have to do. So the practical things will be that. Secondly, check on each other. Check on your vulnerable friends and family around us. Help in the areas that we can help. The people that you have got in your community, just speak to them. Give them a phone call. We might be social distancing, but relational distancing is not permanent. It cannot happen. We need relation to function in society.
Okay.
So that would be my practical advice. Yeah.
All right. Let me come back to you, Mr. Quartey, because you wanted to interject. If you can quickly and briefly surmise your thoughts, and then I'll go to the other participants.
Yeah, I'm very happy Ernestina touched on a very salient point, but I didn't want to come in to spiritualize things, but he has hit the nail right on the point. Now, without God, nothing is possible. We depend on God. Sorry to say, I'm an elder in a church, and sometimes you want to look at the, what do you call it, the people we are talking to before you come out with God solution and how things. But let me tell you, everything, whether democracy, law, this issue about what is racial discrimination, you can trace everything from the source of the Bible. And if you do not read the Bible every morning by 1 a.m., I make it a point to read the Bible and enjoy the Lord. That's not just reading the Bible to gain knowledge, because the Lord himself says, I'm the, what do you call it? I'm the bread of life. So he who comes should eat me. People will ask, how do you eat the Lord? The Lord, the Bible that we have, he said, the letter killeth, but the spirit gives life. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. So when you wake up in the morning and you enjoy the Lord as your life and life support, you are eating him, you are drinking him, you are breathing him. He gives you, what do you call it? Everything.
Okay.
That is what constitutes faith in you.
All right. I'll come back to you, Francis. So, I mean, Mr. Quartey and Ernestina have laid it out very clearly. I'll go back to the question though. So, given these challenges we're facing now, the paradigm shift and the future, what are your views? What are the practical suggestions or solutions that you have for people, particularly in our, I guess, time of life?
I certainly acknowledge the pointers that Mr. Quartey has put across, that there are certain things that are earned through a period of hard work and longevity of commitment to what you're doing, and by so doing, you achieve all these things. The other thing that to come to think about what you said, Gary, the thing is that there's the reality of what we are faced with today. I believe that God gives us wisdom, and He gives us the wisdom to be able to create wealth, to be able to survive and sustain that wealth as well. But I also believe that the reality is out there, and by so speaking about that reality, I mean we must have that wisdom directed at the reality of the situation. Why am I saying this? The days where probably he has put so much dedication and commitment into getting what he has achieved has changed in our dispensation. Because in today's world, in reality, if I consider I'll take Ghana as an example. If I consider the average population, and not so many of them can acquire land with what they are on. Not so many can buy a car, even if you gave them, quite a reasonable amount of time to do that. It's a challenge as it is. So you find out that even in today's world, a lot of people, and I say this without due respect, Mr. Quartey, a lot of people who are sometimes within your age group are dying interstate because there's nothing to leave behind. And that's the truth. That's the reality of what is going on in the world as it is. So that reality is very much in our face, in our generation as we speak right now. And what we have to now look at is the schemes that are available, the schemes that make sense, the schemes that are suitable to our generation, to our income brackets, to what we're able to plug into. By so saying, I'm referred to the likes of the treasury bills, the 401k pension plans, what endowment policies are available and how it's best suited to your affordability, if you know what I'm coming at. So we have to look at the reality of what is in front of us, what you think you can make as a saving, what you think you can make as a long-term income, what you think you can do as long-term investment based on what the reality that you're experiencing today. Of course, we serve a very wonderful God, and He makes opportunities. He gives people breakthroughs, miracles of all kinds of sorts. So it's best to trust in Him, number one, but number two, apply that wisdom to the reality in front of you and pray that He gives you the direction to make the right decision, because there are schemes available to suit that reality.
Right. So, Izzy, I like how you've articulated that, because similar to the point I made earlier about you could be the, highly religious, have strong faith, but you still have to study to become a lawyer like Ernestina.
That's
right?
Undeniably,
So,
yes.
so the point you've just made about applying our faith to the reality in front of us is a really strong point. The question is, what is our wisdom telling us, given the reality we are facing? Is it a different career path we need to choose? Do we all need to go and read computer science and technology because that's where the future is headed? I mean, what actual suggestions would you put forward?
Well, this is exactly what I'm saying. I mean, let me just fine tune what you said about applying your faith towards the reality. Faith in itself is not looking and considering realities. Faith is looking beyond that and saying, look, I can do it despite the circumstances in front of me. I can still see a bright future. So in looking at the reality, you should be able to have that optimistic mindset to look beyond and say to yourself, well, beyond this challenge or limitation, I'm seeing that I want to get to destination C, D, Z, wherever you're going. However, consider practically what is available as a resource to help you to get to that place.
Right. What are some of these available resources? This is what I'm trying to nail down.
I've just listed some, actually. I listed the 401k pension scheme, which I think makes available a 5% deduction of your monthly income towards an investment plan. I don't know exactly what the intricacies of that 401k scheme is,
right,
but I believe that it's very helpful and it's sort of something that has been put in place against the future because of what is happening with the current pension schemes. Again, I'd say invest. I'd probably suggest going into trading of some sort, but ensuring that whatever deposits that you are putting in are not deposits that will kill you off in an instant.
Right. I'm a contractor myself, and I've had a couple of discussions with Gary and a couple of other friends as well to see how we can solve this. Because as a contractor, I was laid off my job. My contract finished because of the pandemic. So I had some time, and I had some opportunities to reflect on the position I was in and how I could make that better in the future. Because I was really unhappy with the fact that I had to rely so much on other people to put bread on my table, and that really bugged me for weeks. I was like, what can I do in the future to actually make this never repeat itself? So I had a couple of practical steps that I had to take, and I think there are two major steps where in this dispensation and with the luxury of the connected world that we have, like the internet and everything, there are two major things that I think we can actually do. One is adding value to people or adding value to anything and the other one is a selfish one, which means you're actually going out there to get the money, like forex investment and all that. With investment, you're not necessarily adding value, but you're investing what you currently have in terms of funds, and then making more money from the money you have. So you're making your money work for you. So I'll touch on that later on. But regarding adding value to people or things, that doesn't necessarily have to do with what you have in terms of finances or whatever. You can actually start adding value to people by what you know. So you can start teaching. So for example, a lot of people, you know, are quite good with fitness and all kind of stuff like that. They started, adding people on social media and started a fitness class. Before you know what, people were paying them thousands of pounds. There was a particular one that my kids do every morning. I remember the guy went from like 1,000 followers or something to like millions. So that guy added value to people's life, and that particularly sustained him throughout this period and even created a kind of business for him. So the fact that you can add value to people's life with your skills, that is something no one can take from you. So for example, if you have a skill, maybe you're an engineer, you can lecture people online. You can, on that kind of platform and make money for yourself. That no one can take from you. You don't have to rely on a third party, maybe a company to hire you to do that. You can do that as on your own. So that's one way. Then, so I thought about what I could do. So I started seeing if I could teach people online and stuff like that. So that was one of the ways that I looked into. The second one is quite dependent on like Francis said, and also Mr. Quartey as well. Investment. There are long-term investment and short-term investment. I'm not a patient person. I do not do long-term investment. I do it a little bit like in properties and all that, but I am more focused on short-term investments. What can you put in now, and what can you get in? What can you get in return within a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? So I decided to go a bit into forex, which is quite volatile and dangerous as well. So, but trust me, if you learn the skill, if I want to spiritualize it as well, the Bible says you need to learn and make yourself approved. You need to learn something. So if you want to do a trade, you need to learn, put the time in. I believe in our generation, if we put the time in to learn something, there is no stopping us. There's so much information on the internet, so much lessons you can learn from other people. And you don't have to do just forex. You can any kind of investment. It could be treasuries, it could be stock, it could be anything. That is a very practical way, because when you're trading in stocks or forex, no matter the economic situation, you will still be making money. So for example, if the price of pounds goes up or down, whichever way, you can trade either ways and still make money. So that is an aspect of investment where you have to learn to get into it. But once you know what you're doing and you're into it, no matter what the economic situation is, you are smiling.
The reason why I keep pressing everybody who's offered an opinion so far is simply this: the world in which we live now, and the pandemic, the situation with China being the manufacturing powerhouse of the world, the relationship and the attitude they've demonstrated when they've been criticized by different nations, cutting off trade and stuff like that with Australia. The fact that in Africa we practically make nothing. We're not a sustainable economy in that sense. Nobody seems to be encouraging a complete paradigm shift in terms of how we do business, what we make, what skills we have. I mean, skills have been touched on, but the fact is that side of things has been neglected for such a long while that when anybody talks about business in Africa, they're talking about going to China, buy stuff to come and sell. Mm-hmm. There's never any discussion about, how do we make things here? How do we acquire the skills to be able to get into big tech, into research, biochemistry, sciences? I mean, people go to university and they read geology. Yes, you need geology to go into mining, sure. But even that mining, we're relying on foreign companies to come and mine and take the money away. So I'll be interested to hear the views of the panel in terms of what we do about things like that to make sure that we're self-sufficient. Because I mean, if a country has a balanced economy, they are far more resilient to the goings on in the macroeconomic world, right? But there doesn't seem to be enough focus on it. I mean, the UK, for example, the government is now talking about rebalancing the economy, investing in engineering, science, technology, etc. Because they've sold off all the engineering, were focusing on finance, and they've now realized that the service industry and finance alone cannot make an economy. So I'm interested to hear what people think about, how we encourage our kids, because it's probably on the late side for people like us to retrain and go into all these different economic areas. But our kids and the people, the generation behind us, probably stand a far better chance.
We have to, I'll speak about Ghana and the UK because I'm Ghanaian. I'm here in the UK. Here in the UK, the opportunity is there to quickly readjust, if I should so say, because sometimes the sports system is there. If you're here in the UK and you live, reasonably well, or not well, if you're comfortable, you can choose property as a means of investment, long-term investment, and that by itself is securing your future in a sense. If you live in a place like Ghana, the options for doing that are very, very limited. Even to be able to put up a house is a challenge. So people are naturally diverted to other options like buying and selling, as is the means of income for many of the people in a place like Ghana. There's a small group of middle income earners who, just probably, I say this, and I stand corrected, like Mr. Quartey, have put in, a lengthy amount of commitment to what they're doing to be able to get to where they are today. But that is not the majority of the population in a place like Ghana. So people are becoming entrepreneurs by themselves. They are running their own business, and in that sort of environment, nothing is guaranteed. The only thing that is guaranteed is your commitment to what you're doing and to have a plan to save long term, and what you will be doing with that long term saving. Apart from that, it's very limited because the middle income earners can just about decide to get a house and a car. And if, one deal goes through here or there, then they're able to, improve on their life status and even, that's a social safety net, as you say, in the future. So it depends on where you are, which country you find yourself in, and what is available, like I said, to you.
Francis, I agree with you to an extent, but it is a mindset. I think even in the UK, you still have people who are poor, despite the support system around. Some people are actually dependent on the benefit, and that's actually their mindset. This is all I could achieve in life, take it. But another person might say, no, it's a choice everyone has to make. There's even in Africa, there are people actually making it because they've learned. It comes to education and change your mindset. And I feel like once you actually set a goal, once you learn for other people who've actually been successful, there will be steps, or you come across people who've done it well, who will help you. It's a matter of again, your vision, your focus and hope. I can do this. You might not necessarily know how I'm going to get here, but as you take the step, I perhaps may meet somebody in the construction field, and then you'd guide me again. So gradually we'll get there. So I think it doesn't matter the country you are. I agree. It's easier maybe here to access resources like, the internet perhaps, might not have connection problems or anything like that. Nevertheless, you will find a way if you've got a different mindset. In terms of, for example, depend on your risk appetite as well in terms of investment. Now, Tayo is talking about Forex. Yes, he probably might have a high risk appetite. I may invest in property because I probably might look at properties and get cash flow regularly, or and again have a capital investment at the end of it. So it all depends on what you want to do. But then as long as you set up to do it, it starts with the mind, changing the mind. Gary, you mentioned a point that it might not be in our lifetime we could educate our children. I don't think it's too late to educate yourself or want to do something new in terms of investment. It just takes learning it. It takes wanting to apply it, and then as a result of that, you will teach your children different things. They will end up doing better than yourself. So again, people are in Ghana, and I'm sure they're doing well despite our lack of resources. Why? Because they probably studied and they've changed their mindset, and they may have opportunities that another person don't have. And I'm coming back to the Bible. The poor will always be with us. The wealth will always be with us. God has said it's a choice that we need to actually make in life. This is my life. Despite, God, give me the strength, give me the wisdom, give me the ideas. I'll also dig information. I'll always attend seminars. Practical things you can do that actually will help you get there. And with the strength that we've got, you will be able to make it. So I don't think it's where we are. I think it's changing your mindset, educating yourself, look into what others have done that you may replicate or learn from it, and I guess emulate and do better.
So by Ernestina's logic, if you are poor, then it's basically your parents and your forefathers' fault because they didn't try hard enough.
And the parents could be poor, but you don't have to remain poor.
I know. That was said in tongue in cheek.
I work in Bank of Ghana. I'm in Committee 10. So a lot of people approach me to get job for them at Bank of Ghana. Yeah. I'm getting to my 70th year, so I'm on pension. Now, I realize that some of them are graduates, but their parents have been selling kenke. Are you getting me? Mm-hmm. So we became friends, and one of them at Committee 11 asked, "Your mother is selling kenke, but when you get Sprinters Road, they don't have good kenke, and she lives at Sprinters Road." I said, "Why don't you transport this kenke to Sprinters Road, sell it, and you make a lot of money?"
Yeah.
So she started. Now, there's another one. They sell Fanti kenke. It's one of the best. I'm not promoting Committee 10.
Okay.
No, last year we traveled to Ethiopia, and their food is not what we like. So in the evening, we take our pepper, black pepper, and the sardine. Then we go and eat to get satisfied. So a young lady, I ordered 50. And I said, "Why don't you take up from your mother? She's growing old. Your cake is very good. She can stand the time. The cake can last for about 10 days. So I encourage her. And now she carries the cake to distribute at the communities. This morning, I saw her carry firewood. And when I saw her, I stopped. I went and near, behind 2.1. 2.1. So I went round, and then I gave her 10 cedis. And I told her I'm very much encouraged for the advice she's taking. She's carrying firewood. But if you see that girl, very beautiful, dressed up and other things. But the mother has grown old. Their Fante cake is very nice. So she's picking up.
Okay.
One day, she'll build a house out of it. So you see, sometimes we look at grandiose things instead of looking at our own small ways. If you go to China, do they have big factories? They have small, what do you call it? Small shops to make those things. Right now, I don't patronize rice from outside. If you eat our local rice with some kotomre, you will enjoy it. I'm serious. You're laughing. But that is a point. We need to come to the nitty-gritties, our practical life. Our situation, we're always looking up and we cannot make it. You see, they said, little drops of water makes a mighty ocean. And once you begin in a small way, you can rise up to the top. It's not about, let me ask, McDonald's, how did he start? When I went to greet him, to preach the gospel, they told me he came to sell the newspaper. I was preaching the gospel to this, what do you call it, the Jamaicans. One of them confronted me, said, you've come from Ghana, poor country, the soldiers have slaves. You are coming to preach the gospel to it. McDonald came and so graphic. Now he has the McDonald's all over the world. So you know what he told me? He said, you are very stupid to come to paying airfare to come to Abrotiri to come and preach the gospel to us. No, seriously, we have to really examine our situations, and sometimes it's big talk. Let me say something. One time, sorry, I'm talking too much, but one time we went to branch managers meeting. A professor from India asked us to speak 3 minutes. We were about 90 minutes. He was listening to us. After we finished, his conclusion, say, all of you are so eloquent, very eloquent, but you are not practical. Everybody was talking from Bank of Ghana, National Investment Bank, JCB, whatever. He said, I've heard all of you. You can speak good English. You speak so much, but practically you are not there. That is our situation in Ghana.
You see, I'm glad you've touched on this, because as you would all have realized, I've been trying to push this enterprising side of us in terms of how we secure our future and the practical things that we can do. So I'm really grateful that Mr. Quartey has brought this thing up. Clearly, with the poverty situation and the social situation in places like Ghana, people are being very enterprising. And actually, the most enterprising, I will say, in places like Ghana and Africa are the poor, because they have nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's easy to be enterprising when you've got $1 million in the bank, right? And I think those with education need to apply themselves or offer the support and help, in my opinion, to the likes of the poor who are actually very enterprising, but don't necessarily have the education and the means to be able to drive that business forward. And in terms of securing our own future, I personally think that we all need to be way more enterprising than we are. So, the COVID situation, and no doubt natural disasters and pandemics to come, might mean that, for example, let me give you a practical example rather than talking parables. Artificial intelligence, it is coming. It will be a paradigm shift. They are now making talk of doctors, even lawyers, engineers, all sorts of people technically becoming redundant in the face of AI. That is the reality we face in as little as 5 to 10 years down the line. Now, when that hits us, effectively, those that are not or haven't been as enterprising will be facing a dire future. So, Mr. Quartey touched on being enterprising. Effectively, the question I'm trying to ask is, how can we think outside the box to be as enterprising and as resilient in the face of what's coming down the line?
From a governmental point of view, or from a state point of view, I would say that in terms of the social safety, Ghana, Nigeria, and lots of the African countries, we are not poor. It's just poor management of the resources, either by state actors or politicians or whatever it is. And what we need to do as a country, yes, there will always be the poor amongst us, the middle class.
Kwadwo, are you there?
The rich will be there. However, I'm of the strong opinion that we need to have that can take care of. It's very important. So a lot of our resources, we need to manage it well, and we need to channel some of these and invest it. So that's from a state point of view. Then also we need to regulate the private sector, such as those that takes care of our pensions and provident funds and all that, because some of them are not sustainable. I don't think so we need to make sure there's a strong regulatory environment such that funds that are invested in such institutions are really taken care of, so that for some who have saved for 20, 25, 30 years, when the time comes, you just don't lose your investment. That point of view, that what do we do in the face of artificial intelligence and the likes of business analytics and all these things? How do we educate ourselves, and how do we position ourselves in terms of education, in terms of putting ourselves or preparing ourselves for the jobs of the future? These are, for me, the key things that we need to really, really ready. Prepare and position yourself for jobs of the future with some of these things. But I believe the good Lord Himself has given us that creativity, that innovation, that innovative mind to be able to tackle some of these things. So for me, I look forward to the future with much optimism rather than the fear. So just briefly from my end. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kwadwo, for that. Does anybody have any points? I know, Akintayo, I did actually cut you off when you were trying to finish your point, so I'll come back to you first before we go anywhere else.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for coming back to me. So, like I was saying earlier, and thanks to everything everybody has said. It makes sense, but I think with regards to our countries and bigger society, the smaller society, I think diversification is what really matters. There's a proverb that says we shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket. That applies to every facet of life, whether in our community, in our country, in our individual lives. So we should try and diversify so that when the storm comes and it hits one of our source of incomes, or it's one or whatever we rely on, then we have other things that would stand in place and then fill that position. And that is where UK failed, like Gary rightly said. We focus so much on things, and we couldn't even manufacture ventilators or stuff by ourselves in mass quantity, because we relied so much on China. And even though China is a manufacturing country, it was still hit hard by other things as well. So diversify. You do not put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify in things, educate people. So I believe our community should be able to educate people, like on money. For example, I think practical approach would be in school curriculums, they should be able to teach investments, which obviously would not be well, it would not be the same thing as a career, but it would just be a total topic on its own, which is money management, investment, stock, and everything, because that is life. That's how to manage money. And also other aspects like manufacturing and all that. So once we diversify, if anything it's one aspect, then the other aspect will be standing. I think that's the only sustainable way I think societies can be resilient enough to handle situations like this.
I mean, look,
yeah.
Thanks for that. It's a shame we don't have Mr. Emmanuel Asiedu on the panel today. I'm actually very keen to have him join, hopefully our next session to share some of his views. But and not to take words out of his mouth in terms of what I know he'd be interested to talk about, but this one district, one factory policy that he came up with and proposed to the government of the day in Ghana. It's been nearly 4 years, and the government in Ghana hasn't even started or begun to implement the policy. And it was a policy that the president actually ran on to get elected. Now, it's a shame because these are some of the ideas that people have, practical ideas that could transform. I mean, however good we're doing right now, it could transform the economy of Ghana. It could transform the whole of Africa. I mean, even, in the Bible, it says, teach a man to fish, right? And you never go hungry. It has a spiritual element, but there's a very practical element to that as well. And when you read the Bible, there's very sound practical advice. When you try and get married, you go through counseling. They teach you practical things you have to do. And that's the angle I'm really trying to push to, which is to say, look, and again, my example, to ace your studies, doesn't matter how strong your faith is, you have to study. So what are some of the practical things that people in Africa can do? And if through this forum, through this podcast, we can start to enlighten people to say, look, don't just go to university to read paleontology, right? Just because that's the only degree that university is offering. It's a waste of a 4-year degree. Not that paleontology isn't important. I mean, there are people who still go to university to read degrees that they come out with that undergrad, and it's not enough, so they are forced to go and do a master's. And what do? Administration. And then they come out of a business administration degree and they can't get the jobs they want. And hopefully people listening to this podcast will you never know, it might spark a thought for somebody to think, you know what, I better future-proof my career. I better diversify. As you said, Tayo, I better start early in terms of investments, in terms of pensions. It's never too early to start a pension. In fact, as soon as you have a child, you need to start a pension for them, in my opinion. Because whether you call it a trust fund, whether it doesn't matter. The point is you're putting something away which they can access at a later date when it's matured.
I personally want to see that entrepreneurship. They say some are born with it, some also learn, but it's something that I really, really want to see in our curriculum. People really need to, from a younger age, they need to start thinking entrepreneurship and not move away from this issue of going to school and get a job, and we really, really need to have a serious mindset shift from that. It's really, really key. And then apart from that, we always have to, like I also said earlier, that there's a lot of local things that we can do. We don't always have to look to the West, to always copy what they are doing. There's a lot of, in fact, as an example, when this COVID thing came, there's been a lot of local creativity, even like manufacturing, some sort of a mechanism that you can use to dispense water or sanitizers and all those kinds of things. There's been a number of local initiatives that we have adopted since this COVID came, and we can do that a lot more, in other areas as well. So personally, I'm looking forward to people getting more creative, and we need to encourage such people. And government needs to also back them with little funds. And Gary, I know we've spoken about it. That's why personally, this venture capital, angel investing kind of thing is where I really, really want to go into. So we can help small businesses grow so that they can now push these ideas. And this is what I think will grow our economies and take care of the safety needs.
All right.
So basically, this is what I have to say.
So I think my conclusion was just like everybody has rightly said. Kojo has rightly talked about entrepreneurship. That is massive, and everybody else has spoken about adding value in a certain kind of way. So I think my conclusion would be, I think the major thing is adding value. So whatever you choose to do, whether as a community, as individuals, if you choose to add value to other people's lives, then you would be picking the right career. So, for example, if you are living in a small community and what is needed at that time is water dispenser, you can add value by learning how to do that, manufacturing it, sourcing funds or whatever, and add value. Wherever we find ourselves as individual, as communities, you need to add value, and you could add value either, adding value to people's lives, adding value to personal lives, to moral lives, or the aesthetics of what people like social media, dresses, and all that. So long as you can pick one, if you like politics, you can add value in the political arena. That would get you funding, that would get you noticed, that would make you money, that would give you social safety net. If you like adding value to personal people's lives, talk about success, talk about family, add value. As so long as you add value, I think people would pay for value. People always pay money for value. And I think success comes with getting more money and adding value to get that money.
All right. Thanks for those thoughts. Ernestina, I'll come to you, and then Mr. Quartey can have the last but one word to mine. So, Ernestina, over to you.
Great points made by everyone. Again, in terms of value, I agree just what Tayo said earlier about education. These are all important. But then what I would say is unity. I think within the African community, in comparison to the Indians, we are not united. So mindsets have to change first. The first point I'll still maintain is having the source of life, remembering who your creator is, because he's the one that gives us wisdom. He's the one that will help us in terms of meeting others and then, directing our steps. Then the practical steps will be educating ourselves. So again, in Africa, for example, what we do know is there's greediness. Everybody wants the fame for themselves. So therefore they want to hoard. But then even when we don't have money, it's not about money being like the practical stuff. It's not about, it's how can we achieve this? You may not have the money then. So like there's a book I read, Double Your Income Doing What You Love. This is where the skills come in. So I've got skills, I'm going to use my skills to then double my income then. Then secondly, if we look at Rich Dad Poor Dad, we have to move into the whole business owners. Then collective, they never will teach us how to make money in school. You will never get the points that you raised, Tayo. Never. You've got to educate yourself, because why? It's a control mechanism. They're using education in the curriculum that is set up the whole worldwide is to actually train your mind to be an employee. But if you want to shift the mindset, you've got to educate yourself, learn from other entrepreneurs, learn from other people. So my point is, yes, trust in the Lord. He's your helper. The practical stuff, educate yourself, be united with everybody. We could come together collectively with our skills and create bigger empires. And that is what, if we're able to achieve, we will do great. But the problem we have is human beings are greedy. But again, if we all change our shift to where we love God first and we love our neighbors, we'll be able to do that. So that's what I'll conclude. Creator, and he'll help us through all circumstances. That is where it starts from. The rest goes with the practical step. Thank you.
Okay, that's very interesting and very synonymous of a lawyer closing out in court. That's really good. Mr. Quartey, if you don't mind giving us your final thoughts.
Well, just 30 seconds. I would say that faith without works is dead. Being alone. And I travel a lot in this country because of my evangelism and these things. And I feel very sad that we have such a vast land and we cannot exploit it. Sad. And let me say something. I've purchased a big land in Odumas and Artists. We can talk about farming and artists, but if we do not have support, if we are not united, and then we are going to import certain things that we can plant in this country, where do we go? That is just my conclusion. Where do we go? We can speak, but if we do not practicalize and apply ourselves to practical situations, may the Lord cover us. We may end up talking a lot, but we'll not be able to. We have the potential. Africa has all the potential you can think of, where the wise don't have. Why do they come to this country? It's not for the love of us to exploit our resources. I will give it to them on a silver platter. Is that what we want to do? I've completed.
Okay. Francis, I mean, you touched on natural resources, you touched on investment. Kwadwo touched on entrepreneurship. And these are pointers that I want whoever is listening to this podcast to basically plant into their minds as things to consider and think out of the box about. Akintayo talked about adding value and education. Mr. Quartey has touched on the steady approach and what's gotten him where he is. Ernestina, you touched on the mindset, faith generally, unity, and you also highlighted self-reliance. All of which are, I think, combined. If any single person is considering all these points, I can't see how they won't be successful in whatever they do. I mean, my overriding thoughts are that, again, the unity bit, because no man is an island. No individual can do everything on their own, right? We need people to collaborate with. That's why even the human body has different parts to it. There's the brain, but there are hands, limbs, and all sorts. And so the bit I particularly chime with is the unity bit. And if we come together and we can eliminate the whole greed and self-centered aspects of humanity, and it's something that's age-old. I mean, Cain killed his brother because he was envious. It's something that's with us. And I think factoring that into everything we do to make sure that we're not envy and greed isn't getting the better of us could go a long way to spreading help and to bringing others with us, particularly the poor, which overall will help everybody get to the right standard. So that's my overriding thoughts. Thank you all for taking the time to join this podcast. So thank you all very much, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Nice catching up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Quartey.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you. Bye.
Wow.